Hi, this is Karen White of Divine Time Astrology. I've been a professional astrologer in Southern California for the past 7 years. I've been studying astrology seriously since 1992, and I love Jaimini astrology because it's the most reliable technique I've ever found to show career, purpose, talents, and skills. I'm using Jaimini astrology here to show you how you can see if you could be a writer. Not just a writer of fiction, but nonfiction too, including articles and technical writing. This is not the only way to see writing in the chart. There are yogas for writing too, but I'm concentrating on the Jaimini technique way of seeing it in the chart because Jaimini is a very concrete technique showing what you can actually be in your life. At this point, I'm posting once a week on Mondays, though I'm considering posting on Thursdays as well to cover other topics besides authors. And if there is any topic that you would particularly love me to cover, please say so down in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Okay, this is the chart of Ray Bradbury, one of my very favorite authors of all time. He was a prolific author of hundreds of short stories, close to 50 books, as well as numerous poems, essays, operas, plays, teleplays, and screenplays. He is basically one of the most celebrated writers of our time. And his groundbreaking works include Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, Dandelion Wine, and Something Wicked This Way Comes. He wrote the screenplay for John Huston's classic film adaptation of Moby Dick and was nominated for an Academy Award. He adapted 65 of his stories for television's The Ray Bradbury Theater and won an Emmy for his teleplay of The Halloween Tree. I remember when I was a kid seeing The Illustrated Man and The Veldt on TV. He was the recipient of the 2000 National Book Foundation Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters, the 2004 National Medal of Arts, and the 2000 Pulitzer Prize Special Citation, among many honors. One of his favorite stories is the story of him meeting a carnival magician, Mr. Electrical, in 1932. At the end of his performance, Electrico reached out to the 12-year-old Bradbury, touched the boy with his sword, and commanded, "Live forever." Bradbury later said, "I decided that was the greatest idea I had ever heard. I started writing every day, and I never stopped." Okay, so let's see the writing talent and ability in his chart. First, we look for the Atmakaraka. He's the sun in Leo, as you see here. So a really, really nice sun. The sun is steadfast and consistent. And so obviously, as the prolific writer that he was, starting from the age of 12, he was steadfast and consistent in his writing for sure. Now it's with Jupiter, a wisdom planet, and with Mercury, the natural ruler of writing. But let's look at the moon, because the moon is the planet that rules writing in particular. So his moon is in Sagittarius. It's ruled by Jupiter, one of the 3 planets that we need to see for a writer. The moon needs to be either in the sign of Jupiter, Mercury, or Venus, aspected by Jupiter, Mercury, or Venus, or with Jupiter, Mercury, or Venus. And here we see it's in the sign of Jupiter and aspected by Venus. Now Jupiter too is with his Atmakaraka sun. Now let's see if he fits the other criteria. We need the 3rd house for the hard work of writing, the 5th house for creativity, and the 9th house for teaching and telling tales. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. The ascendant is Capricorn. The third sign, remember, Jaimini is a sign-based technique. We're not looking at the cusps at this point, just the signs. So the third house is ruled by Pisces. And the moon, the rider planet, is aspecting the third house. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter again is with the Atmakarika. And then the fifth house is the house of creativity. And this is ruled by Venus. Well, Venus is here in the ninth, aspecting the moon. And it's in Virgo, so it's ruled by Mercury. Mercury is also with his Atmakarika sun. So now we go to the ninth house, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the moon is aspecting the ninth. And again, Venus is in the ninth, aspecting the moon, ruled by Mercury, which is with the Atmakarika. And then you go over here to the Navamsha, and we see his Atmakarika sun is in Sagittarius, again with Jupiter. His books had a lot to do with wisdom and higher knowledge, and that is what Jupiter is. It's wisdom and higher knowledge. It's also the love of knowledge. It's the planet that wants to, well, it has compassion for the suffering of mankind and wants to help mankind in some way through the perspective of wisdom. And then Mercury is just a really good manifesting planet. It's also knowledge of a different kind. It's the planet of manifestation. It's the planet that takes ideas and makes it happen in the concrete world. And then I can't help but think about his book, The Martian Chronicles. It was one of my favorite books. And we see here that his Mars is highly dignified in the sign of Scorpio and is aspecting the ascendant. Well, it's with Rahu too, and Rahu is the planet of technology, especially very far future technologies. And that book, The Martian Chronicles, that he might have been tapping into something that may happen in the future. Also, you see here in the Navamsha, he has the moon, the rider planet, with Mercury, aspected by Venus and Mars. Well, Saturn too, and Mars. And Saturn, you know, some of his books, especially the Martian Chronicles, has a very melancholic tone to it. And Saturn would be the ruler of anything melancholy, and that's aspecting the moon as well. And then the Martian Chronicles, we see here he has an exalted Mars also aspecting the moon. So obviously he was destined to be a writer, and he was. He was very, very prolific. Okay, so now on to the second writer. I wanted to feature two writers today because just one writer a week seems like not enough. So now I'm going to talk about one of my favorite spiritual authors, Anne Dillard. My very favorite book by Anne Dillard is Pilgrim at Tinker's Creek. It's a book I've read many times and will continue to reread for the rest of my life. She won the Pulitzer Prize for this book. In fact, she's won some kind of prize or another, or received some kind of critical recognition for every book she's written. She's also written lots of poetry and scholarly academic writing as well. She's tackled all kinds of spiritual topics, even though on her website, which I recommend that you go to if you want to know more about her, which is annedillard.com, she lists herself as not having a particular religion, which I found very interesting. But she writes a lot about spirituality, she writes about God, she writes about consciousness in such a way that's very poetic, and I found it transporting. So now let's examine her chart to see how the writing talent shows up. So her Atmakarika, as we see here, is Mars. And if you've forgotten what that means, or if you're watching this for the first time, Utmakaraka is the self-producer planet. Every planet in your chart is a planet that has produced someone in particular in your life, including yourself. And as we see here in this little table, the Utma, which means self, and Karaka, which means producer, for her is Mars. So we'll look at Mars, and Mars is here in Pisces, and it's aspected by the moon, the planet that must be involved in order to be a writer. Another one of the conditions is that the moon be in the sign of, aspected by, or with either Jupiter, Venus, or Mercury. And the moon here is ruled by Jupiter and aspected by Jupiter, which I may not have mentioned in the one about Ray Bradbury, but in the Jaimini technique, the dual signs or mutable signs aspect only each other. So now we look for the other criteria, which is the third house for the hard work of writing, the fifth house for creativity, and the ninth house for teaching and telling tales. So she's rising sign is Cancer, and again in the Jaimini technique, we're not looking at the cusps, we're looking at the signs because it's a sign-based technique. And we count 3 signs to the third house, and we see that the moon is aspecting the third house. And then from the third house to the fifth house, the fifth is in Scorpio, so that means it's ruled by Mars. Well, here's Mars up here aspecting the moon, her Utmakaraka planet. And then we go from there to the ninth, so this is Capricorn's the 7th, 8th, 9th. Her Utmakaraka is in the ninth and is aspected by the moon as well as Jupiter. Now when we go over to the Navamsha, we see that her Utmakaraka planet Mars is in the sign of Pisces. Pisces, when your Utmakaraka is in that sign, in the Navamsha, means that the current lifetime is one for tremendous spiritual growth. So basically, this is what her life was about growing spiritually. And so you see that in all of her writing. And then again, here it is, it's aspected by a really highly dignified Mercury, the natural planet of writing, in Virgo. When it's with Venus, 2 Venus-Mercury combinations is a very talented person. And because they're in dual or mutable signs, Venus and Mercury are aspecting her Utmakaraka, and so is Jupiter again. So you could be of any religion or any spiritual tradition and still really enjoy her books. And if you'd like to get a Jaimini reading for yourself to see what your talents, skills, especially writing, and your career and purpose are about, just contact me through email at Karen@divinetimeastrology.com. I love books. They have been my lifelong friends and teachers, and I don't think there can be too many writers in the world. This is Karen White of Divine Time Astrology. Until next time, good night.